People often look at my life from the outside, and frankly, they find themselves deeply disappointed when they picture the existence of someone who has compounded billions of dollars within the financial markets. They anticipate a Hollywood production. They envision a ruthless Wall Street predator surrounded by 5 glowing computer monitors, barking orders into a telephone, surviving on a mere 3 hours of sleep each night. They expect chaos. They anticipate constant, frenetic activity. But when they observe how I actually function, they encounter an elderly gentleman sitting in a modest office located in Omaha, Nebraska. They see an individual who dedicates approximately 80% of his day to sitting in a tranquil room, engrossed in reading financial documents, delving into history books, and simply engaging in thought. They observe a calendar devoid of appointments. They witness a life marked by extreme, almost excruciating periods of profound silence and deliberate inaction. And because society has fundamentally conditioned them, they gaze upon my quiet sanctuary and inquire, how can someone who appears to do so little accomplish so much? The answer to that question contains the single most fiercely guarded secret held by the ultra-wealthy. It is a secret that the global corporate infrastructure desperately hopes you never uncover. You have been sold a magnificent, highly profitable illusion. That illusion is the belief that busyness equates to significance and that physical motion translates directly into financial advancement. From the moment you enter the educational system, you are indoctrinated to believe that success is the direct mathematical outcome of grinding, hustling, and perspiring. You are taught to equate exhaustion with moral virtue. You observe people wearing their 80-hour work weeks like medals of honor. They boast about their chronic lack of sleep. They brag about consuming lunch at their desks while simultaneously managing a dozen urgent emails. They proudly declare they are on the grind, completely oblivious to the fact that they are willingly participating in their own financial and biological demolition. Allow me to present you with a harsh, unshakable truth that will fundamentally alter your perspective forever. In the realm of genuine capital, busyness is not an indicator of success. Being busy is a symptom of poverty. If your calendar is crammed with consecutive meetings from 8 in the morning until 6 in the evening, you are not an apex predator. You are the prey. If you lack the freedom to spend 5 hours on a Tuesday afternoon sitting quietly, simply contemplating your life, you are not wealthy. It is irrelevant whether your annual income is $50,000 or $500,000. If your time is dictated by the pressing demands of other people, you remain a machine. You are a biological processor rented out by someone else. This brings us to the core philosophy that distinguishes the top 1% of capital allocators from the 99% of exhausted laborers. I refer to it as the bandwidth rule. To grasp the bandwidth rule, you must cease thinking of your brain as a magical organ capable of operating at maximum capacity indefinitely. You must begin viewing your brain as a battery possessing a strictly limited amount of daily energy. We term this energy your cognitive bandwidth. Each morning when you awaken, you commence with 100% cognitive bandwidth. This represents the mental RAM you utilize to solve complex problems, recognize patterns, regulate your emotions, and most critically, to make high-level strategic decisions that enable your wealth to compound. However, here lies the tragedy afflicting the working class and the high-earning middle class. Your environment is meticulously engineered to aggressively pilfer that bandwidth before you even have an opportunity to employ it for your own benefit. Let's examine a standard Tuesday for an ambitious, hard-working professional. You awaken to the jarring sound of an alarm clock. You immediately reach for your smartphone, inundating your brain with notifications, news alerts, and manufactured urgency. Your battery drops to 90%. You rush through your morning routine, skip a proper breakfast, and plunge into the morning commute. You spend 45 minutes trapped in bumper-to-bumper traffic, contending with aggressive drivers and absorbing the stress of the highway. By the time you walk through the glass doors of your corporate office building, your cognitive battery has already dwindled to 70%, and you haven't even begun your actual work yet. Then the real extraction commences. You endure a 2-hour strategic alignment meeting that could have been summarized in a single email. You navigate office politics. You suppress your frustration when your manager assigns you a meaningless, repetitive task. You respond to 50 emails, constantly diverting your attention from one minor crisis to another. Context switching ranks among the most violent assaults on your mental energy. Every time you interrupt deep focus to answer a Slack message, your brain expends a substantial amount of glucose to recalibrate. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, your cognitive battery registers 30%. You consume a highly caffeinated energy drink or a double espresso, artificially jolting your nervous system to maintain alertness. By 6 o'clock, when you finally depart the office and confront the brutal commute home, your battery hovers at 5%. You walk through your front door, physically tense, emotionally drained, and existing in a state of total neurochemical bankruptcy. And this is the precise moment when the system achieves victory. When your cognitive battery sits at 5%, you are biologically incapable of constructing a financial empire. You cannot execute the mathematics of compounding. You lack the mental RAM remaining to scrutinize a complex real estate contract. You haven't the energy to analyze a company's balance sheet or to design a scalable digital enterprise. Your brain has been forced into a primitive, desperate survival mode. An exhausted mind does not seek liberation. An exhausted mind seeks immediate comfort and anesthesia. So what do? You collapse onto the couch. You order expensive food delivery because cooking demands too much executive function. You open a streaming service and binge watch 3 hours of television to numb the trauma of your day. Or worse, you open a brokerage app on your phone because you feel desperate. And because your decision-making center is completely impaired, you search for a lottery ticket. You purchase a highly speculative, dubious cryptocurrency. Or you trade risky options, hoping for a magical escape hatch. You make emotional, impulsive financial decisions that actively dismantle whatever modest capital you have managed to accumulate. This is not an accident. The collapse of your cognitive bandwidth constitutes a feature of the system, not a bug. Your employer pays you a salary specifically to rent 100% of your cognitive bandwidth for building their assets. They want you leaving the office with a completely empty tank. Why? Because a worker with zero cognitive bandwidth is a compliant worker. A tired population does not question the rules of the game. A middle manager who is chronically exhausted will never possess the energy to step back, recognize that his financial strategy represents a mathematical dead end, and launch his own competing firm. He will simply wake up the next morning, consume another coffee, and step right back onto the diamond-encrusted hamster wheel. The system thrives on your physical and mental exhaustion. It profits from your lack of bandwidth. Now contrast that existence with the quiet room in Omaha. Why do I protect my schedule with such absolute ruthless aggression? Why do I decline nearly every meeting, dinner invitation, and media appearance? Because I understand that my sole true competitive advantage in the global market resides in my cognitive bandwidth. My entire job, my only genuine purpose as a capital allocator, is to make perhaps 2 or 3 massive, highly accurate decisions per year. To swing at the fattest pitch, I must maintain my mental battery at 99% at all times. I cannot afford to drain my RAM on office politics, chaotic email chains, or the daily panic of the news cycle. By preserving my bandwidth, I'm accumulating potential energy. When the market inevitably crashes, when the rest of Wall Street operates on zero sleep, sweating, panicking, and making catastrophic errors out of fear, I remain perfectly calm. My mind is rested, my battery is full. I step into the chaos, perceive the board with absolute clarity, and deploy billions of dollars into the finest assets on earth at a fraction of their true value. That is the power of the bandwidth rule. You cannot compound your wealth until you first learn how to protect your mind. If you aspire to escape the trap, you must cease treating your brain like a disposable engine. But recognizing this constitutes only the initial step. Next, we must examine how you actually begin to reclaim your time and the deadly noise trap that keeps 99% of people paralyzed. Let's scrutinize the exact opposite of the exhausted, burned-out middle manager. Let's explore what the true apex predators of the financial world actually do with the vast majority of their waking hours. People are endlessly preoccupied with my investment portfolio. They crave knowledge about which stocks I'm purchasing, which companies I'm acquiring, and which macroeconomic trends I'm monitoring. But they almost entirely overlook my daily routine. They ignore the concrete physical reality of how I allocate my time. If you were to place a hidden camera in my office, you would find it incredibly boring. The truth is, I spend nearly 80% of my day seated in a comfortable chair, reading and thinking. To the untrained eye, this resembles retirement. To a middle manager who equates frantic motion with productivity, it appears as though I am accomplishing absolutely nothing. But in the domain of high-level capital allocation, reading and deep thinking represent the most aggressive, high-leverage actions you can possibly undertake. Why do I dedicate 80% of my day to reading? Because I am no longer engaged in a game of addition. The working class and corporate executives play addition. I play multiplication. I do not need to make 1,000 small decisions weekly to justify my salary to a boss. I do not need to hustle for $100 here and $50 there. My entire purpose is to make perhaps one or two decisions annually, but those decisions must be mathematically flawless. They must be multi-billion-dollar decisions. If your entire job consists of swinging at only one or two pitches per decade, how do you prepare? You do not prepare by flailing wildly at the air. You prepare by studying every single pitcher, every single team, and every single variable in the stadium. You sit quietly so that when the ball finally crosses your absolute sweet spot, you swing with 100% certainty and devastating force. But what exactly am I reading during those hours? This is where 99% of people completely misunderstand the assignment. Most individuals in the modern economy drown in information, yet they remain utterly starved for genuine wisdom. They consume financial news, social media gossip, the daily panic of the stock market ticker, and the opinions of talking heads on television. This is not knowledge, this is noise. Noise is deliberately engineered to trigger your amygdala. It is designed to make you emotional, to instill fear, and to compel you to trade impulsively. The knowledge I pursue during my 80% quiet time possesses a shelf life of decades, not days. I read annual reports from companies dating back 50 years. I study the fundamental economics of diverse industries. I examine human psychology and the predictable patterns of mass panic and mass greed. I am searching for structural, unshakable truths that remain unchanged when the Federal Reserve adjusts interest rates by 0.25%. Knowledge compounds exactly like capital. Every book you read, every balance sheet you analyze, and every mental model you construct adds to a foundational database within your brain. When you continue this practice for 10, 20, or 30 years, the compounding effect becomes staggering. You begin to perceive the world in high definition while everyone else navigates through a dense fog. When a crisis erupts, others perceive only a terrifying temporary dip in stock prices. Because I have spent decades building my mental database, I discern the structural weakness of the panicked sellers and the intrinsic value of the asset. This brings us to the ultimate status symbol of the true elite. It is not a private jet. It is not a super yacht. It is not a diamond-encrusted watch. The ultimate flex of the ultra-wealthy is a completely blank calendar. A blank calendar constitutes an impenetrable fortress. It represents the ultimate moat surrounding your cognitive bandwidth. In the corporate world, an empty calendar signifies uselessness. It implies you are unimportant. People fill their calendars with meaningless meetings merely to prove to themselves and their supervisors that they exist. They treat a packed schedule as a badge of honor, but every single meeting, every Zoom call, and every quick sync represents a violent leak in your cognitive battery. I say no to nearly everything. No is the most powerful and profitable word in the vocabulary of a capital allocator. You must regard your attention and your mental energy as your most precious, irreplaceable capital. Every time you say yes to a meaningless interaction, you willingly incinerate your own cognitive bandwidth. You permit someone else to reach into your brain and steal the electricity you require to construct your own empire. I refuse to allow the market's noise, the media's demands, or the stress of daily operations to drain my battery. I do not micromanage the CEOs of the companies I own. I recruit brilliant individuals. I allocate the capital, and then I step out of their way and return to my quiet room. Because I aggressively protect my 80%, I am never compelled to make a decision born of exhaustion. I am never forced to make a decision rooted in artificial urgency. Now, you might be sitting there listening to this and thinking, this is all well and good for a billionaire, but I have a boss. I work a 9-to-5 job. I cannot simply sit in a room and read all day. That is the excuse of a defeated mind. You may not possess 80% of your day, but you possess 20%. What are you doing with the 2 hours before your commute to work? What are you doing with your weekends? When you finally secure a moment of free time, are you protecting that space to upgrade your mental software, or are you surrendering it gratis to streaming services, video games, and social media algorithms? The modern middle class actively sabotages its own free time because sitting in silence terrifies them. Sitting in silence forces you to confront the reality of your life. It forces you to acknowledge that your linear income strategy is failing. So you fill your precious remaining bandwidth with entertainment and distraction, ensuring you will awaken tomorrow and remain on the hamster wheel. If you do not ruthlessly defend your mental space, the system will gladly inundate it with highly addictive garbage. You must construct your own quiet room, even if only for 1 hour daily. You must commence accumulating compounding knowledge instead of consuming daily noise, because out there in the real world, the noise is mathematically designed to enslave you. And that brings us to the most dangerous mechanism of the modern digital economy. We must scrutinize the noise trap and how 99% of the population remains completely blind to the fact that their attention is being harvested for profit. Welcome to the greatest psychological trap ever devised by human beings. We are going to examine the noise machine. If the corporate system drains your cognitive bandwidth from 9 to 5, the modern digital economy is engineered to harvest whatever minuscule fraction of battery you retain upon returning home. You must understand that human attention is the most heavily hunted, aggressively mined resource on the planet today. Corporations worth trillions of dollars possess entire business models reliant on keeping your nervous system in a constant state of hyperarousal. They employ thousands of the world's smartest engineers, psychologists, and neuroscientists. Their sole job is to devise methods to bypass your logical brain and directly hijack your amygdala. And sadly, for 99% of the population, these corporations are winning. Observe the average retail investor today. Observe the individuals attempting to build wealth while remaining plugged into the matrix of daily news. They awaken and immediately check the futures market. They stare at glowing red and green lines on their smartphone screens while sipping their morning coffee. They listen to financial podcasts during their commute, absorbing the panicked opinions of talking heads compensated to generate outrage, not accurate forecasts. During their lunch break, they log into their brokerage accounts and check the price of their cryptocurrency or tech stocks. They check it again at 3 o'clock. They check it again before retiring for the night. They believe that by constantly monitoring the market, they are being responsible. They believe that consuming a massive quantity of financial data transforms them into investors. Allow me to be brutally clear. This is not investing. This is the illusion of control. You are not trading the market. The market is trading you. Every time you glance at a stock chart flashing red, your brain registers it as a physical threat. It releases cortisol. It triggers your fight or flight response. You are subjecting your biological hardware to dozens of micro traumas every single day. You are incinerating your most precious capital, your cognitive bandwidth, on microscopic price fluctuations that signify absolutely nothing over a decade-long span. This is the noise trap. The system feeds you an endless stream of irrelevant, anxiety-inducing data to ensure you remain in a permanent state of cognitive depletion. When your brain is constantly overwhelmed by daily noise, you lose the capacity to perceive the macro picture. You lose the ability to perform long-term fundamental analysis. You become a reactionary creature, twitching at every headline, buying when the media urges greed, and selling in a panic when the media incites terror. This trap does not solely affect amateur stock traders. It completely paralyzes the ambitious middle class in their careers as well. Consider the so-called high performers in the corporate world. They pride themselves on their extreme responsiveness. They reply to a Slack message within 30 seconds. They spend 3 hours agonizing over the font size and color palette of a PowerPoint presentation that no one will recall tomorrow. They exhaust themselves navigating office gossip, engaging in petty political battles, and worrying about what their manager thinks of their new shoes. This constitutes tactical diligence, but it is strategic self-destruction. They are optimizing the absolutely wrong variables. They are utilizing 100% of their mental RAM to play a game with a capped payout. They are so incredibly focused on climbing the rungs of the ladder before them that they lack the bandwidth to step back and realize the ladder is leaning against the wrong wall. The elite capital allocator operates in a completely different dimension. I do not check stock prices daily. I do not concern myself with what the Federal Reserve announces on a Tuesday afternoon. I do not care about the latest geopolitical scandal dominating the 24-hour news cycle. Why? Because 99% of what is reported today will be entirely irrelevant in 5 years. If it will not matter in 5 years, it does not warrant a single percentage point of my cognitive battery today. By actively ignoring the noise, I am undertaking something that terrifies the average person. I am deliberately disconnecting from the crowd. There exists a deep psychological comfort in moving with the herd. When everyone around you panics, it feels safer to panic alongside them. When everyone is purchasing a hyped tech stock, it feels incredibly isolating to sit on the sidelines with your cash doing nothing. The media will label you outdated. The crowd will mock you for missing out. But you must comprehend that the crowd is almost invariably wrong at the extremes. The herd mentality is precisely what steers the 99% into the financial slaughterhouse. To achieve exceptional compounding results, you must be comfortable appearing foolish in the short term. You must be at ease with the silence of your own room. When you insulate yourself from the noise machine, something magical occurs. Your cognitive battery begins to recharge. Your mind clears. You cease reacting to the daily weather of the market and commence studying the permanent climate of human behavior and business fundamentals. You stop asking what the stock price is doing today and start asking whether this business possesses a durable competitive advantage. Can this asset survive a catastrophic recession? Is the management team honest? These are the sole questions that genuinely matter, and they are questions that can only be answered by a fully rested, deeply concentrated mind. The system desires you distracted, anxious, and hyperactive because a distracted population is exceptionally easy to separate from its money. The Wall Street machine, the brokerage firms, and the media networks all profit immensely from your frantic motion. They generate their billions from the friction of your constant trading and your constant consumption. But true wealth is silent. True power is patient. You must erect an invisible, impenetrable wall around your attention. Treat your focus exactly as you treat your bank account. Do not surrender it to every algorithm or news anchor that demands it, because when you successfully defend your cognitive bandwidth, you set the stage for ultimate financial execution. When the noise reaches a deafening peak and the system finally cracks, you will be the sole individual remaining standing with a clear head. Let's examine precisely what transpires when the market breaks and how the rested mind executes the fat pitch while the rest of the world burns. We have established that the system is designed to keep you exhausted, but now we must examine the exact moment when that exhaustion becomes financially fatal. We must scrutinize the anatomy of a market crash and how the ultimate transfer of wealth actually occurs. Most people believe wealth is created during a bull market when everything ascends and everyone profits. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of how capital operates. Bull markets do not create wealth. Bull markets merely generate the illusion of wealth. True generational wealth is forged in the absolute darkest, most terrifying moments of a financial crisis. Every decade or so, the global economy undergoes a massive systemic shock. It might be a housing collapse, a global pandemic, or a sudden implosion of credit markets. When this transpires, the stock market does not simply drop. It violently fractures. Asset prices plunge 20%, 30%, or even 50% within weeks. Now, I want you to contemplate the exhausted middle manager we discussed earlier. Consider the retail investor who has been burning his cognitive bandwidth, checking his portfolio every single day. When the market crashes, his biological hardware completely short circuits. He is already operating on 5% cognitive battery merely to survive his day job, but now he opens his brokerage account and witnesses half of his life savings evaporating in 48 hours. His brain does not process this as a mathematical event. His amygdala processes this as a lethal physical threat. His body floods with cortisol and adrenaline. He cannot sleep. He cannot focus at work. He argues with his spouse. He is completely paralyzed by a toxic combination of financial terror and physical exhaustion. He sits before the television watching the media broadcast absolute doom. The talking heads scream that the global financial system is on the verge of collapse. And because his cognitive bandwidth is utterly destroyed, he cannot perform critical thinking. He cannot analyze the intrinsic value of the companies he owns. He finally reaches his breaking point. He logs into his account at the exact market bottom and hits the sell button. He sells his stocks at a 50% loss. But you must grasp the psychology of this moment. He is not selling his assets because it constitutes a rational financial decision. He is selling because he desires the psychological pain to cease. He is purchasing emotional relief and paying for it with his financial future. The market has successfully extracted his capital precisely because it first extracted his cognitive bandwidth. Now let's pan the camera back to my quiet room in Omaha. While the rest of the world panics, sweats, and liquidates their life savings out of pure terror, what am I doing? My calendar remains completely blank. I am still sleeping a full 8 hours nightly. I am not watching the screaming pundits on financial news networks. My cognitive battery remains at 100% because I have spent the last 5 years aggressively protecting my mental bandwidth and ignoring the daily noise. I am emotionally detached. I step out of my quiet room and survey the wreckage of the global economy. I do not perceive a financial apocalypse. I perceive the greatest clearance sale in the history of capitalism. The market is manic-depressive. During the bull market, it is manic, attempting to sell mediocre companies at insane valuations. I simply stood at the plate, bat on my shoulder, watching those terrible pitches fly by. I did not swing, even when the crowd labeled me an idiot. But now the market is profoundly depressed. It has tripped over its own feet out of sheer panic. It is hurling a slow, predictable, perfect pitch right down the middle of my strike zone. It is offering me fractions of world-class, unshakable businesses, companies that produce the food you eat, the energy you use, and the infrastructure you rely on, for 40 cents on the dollar. This is the fat pitch. This is the exact millisecond I have been anticipating. I do not need to execute 1,000 small trades. I do not need to hustle or sweat. I pick up the phone with absolute mental clarity and deploy tens of billions of dollars in a single afternoon. I purchase the exact same assets that the exhausted middle manager is frantically selling. I am transferring the wealth from his depleted mind directly into my rested mind. The market is not a casino. The market is a machine that transfers capital from the impatient and exhausted to the patient and rested. This is the brutal mathematics of asymmetric returns. Consider the sheer scale of the inequality here. The middle-class worker spent 10 years rising at 6 in the morning, sitting in traffic, taking orders from a boss, and sacrificing his health to save $100,000. He invested 100% of the physical effort, yet because he lacked the bandwidth to manage his own psychology, he lost half his money in a single week. Meanwhile, I spent those same 10 years sitting in a comfortable chair reading books and doing ostensibly nothing. My physical effort approximated zero. Yet by making one highly concentrated, deeply rational decision when my battery was full, I compounded my net worth by another 10 billion. I invested 1% of the physical labor and extracted 99% of the financial reward. This is why the belief that physical hard work leads to wealth is the most dangerous lie you will ever encounter. Wealth is not correlated with how much you perspire. Wealth is entirely correlated with how much leverage you control and how accurately you make decisions when stakes are at their absolute peak. You prevail by refusing to play the game on society's terms. You prevail by hoarding your cognitive bandwidth so that when the system fractures, you are the sole individual left with a functioning brain. But you might be listening to this and experiencing a sense of despair. You might be thinking, I am already exhausted. I am already ensnared in the cycle. How do I even begin to construct this mental fortress? You do not need billions of dollars to execute this strategy. The bandwidth rule scales down perfectly to the average person. However, to implement it, you must perform a radical surgical intervention on your daily life. You must halt the bleeding. You must transition from a consumer of noise to a curator of silence. And that brings us to the final, most actionable phase of this entire philosophy. We must outline the exact blueprint for reclaiming your mind, plugging the leaks in your battery, and finally achieving escape velocity from the wage slavery matrix. We have diagnosed the disease. We have exposed the invisible mechanisms of the wage slavery matrix. We have observed how the system drains your cognitive bandwidth from 9 to 5 and how the noise machine harvests the remainder of your battery before you sleep. The diagnosis is terminal for the average person, but you are still listening, which signifies you are prepared for the cure. If you genuinely aspire to achieve financial escape velocity, you must fundamentally alter how you interface with the modern world. You must cease playing the victim and become the architect of your own cognitive fortress. This necessitates a radical surgical intervention. You cannot gradually transition out of the matrix. You must forcefully unplug yourself. Step one of this blueprint is what I term stopping the bleeding. You cannot charge a battery that possesses a massive gaping leak. Before you attempt to learn investing, before you try to build a business, you must ruthlessly audit where your mental energy is leaking. You must repeal your own personal exhaustion tax. Examine your bank statements. Scrutinize the money you expend to artificially medicate yourself from the trauma of your daily grind. The expensive food delivery, the premium streaming subscriptions, the happy hour drinks with coworkers you secretly dislike, the luxury car payment you make merely to feel a fleeting sense of status during your commute. You must realize that every single one of those purchases constitutes an act of financial self-sabotage. You are purchasing short-term dopamine hits to numb the pain of a life you do not control. Stop buying the anesthesia. Experience the pain of your situation. Utilize that pain as the raw fuel to construct your escape pod. Take all the capital you were expending on the exhaustion tax and repurpose it into what I term a bandwidth fund. Financial advisors will instruct you to build an emergency fund so you can repair a broken water heater or fix your car. That is the mindset of the middle class. The true elite construct a bandwidth fund so they can reclaim their psychological freedom. When you possess 1 year of living expenses residing in a liquid account, completely untouched, something biological shifts within your brain. Your baseline cortisol level drops. You cease operating from a state of primal scarcity. When your manager makes an unreasonable demand or requests you work late on a Friday night, you do not experience the terrifying panic of a trapped animal. You possess the financial leverage to meet their gaze and say no. And that brings us to step 2 of the blueprint, mastering the ultimate filter. I have often stated that the difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to nearly everything. No is not merely a word, it is a boundary. It is a protective shield encircling your cognitive battery. You must commence saying no with extreme prejudice. Say no to the pointless Zoom meeting. Say no to the social gathering that drains your energy. Say no to opening your brokerage app on a Tuesday morning to check a stock price that will be irrelevant in 10 years. You must say no to 99% of the opportunities presented to you so that you retain 100% of your bandwidth available for the one opportunity that will genuinely transform your life. It will be incredibly uncomfortable initially. People will label you antisocial. They will call you selfish. They will claim you have changed. Let them complain. Their anger stems from the fact that they can no longer siphon off your cognitive electricity to power their own agendas. Once you have stopped the bleeding and once you have erected the fortress of no around your attention, you will finally encounter something you have likely not felt since childhood. You will experience the luxury of a fully charged mental battery. You will possess a quiet room of your own. And this is where step 3 commences, the construction of the machine. You must violently shed your identity as a laborer. You must cease asking, how can I work harder to earn more money? You must start asking, what asset can I acquire or what system can I build that will generate cash flow independent of my fatigue? In the beginning, your machine will appear incredibly pathetic. You might spend $200 studying a market, protecting your bandwidth, and deploying a modest amount of capital. In the first month, your machine might generate exactly $10. Your coworkers, who remain running furiously on the diamond-encrusted hamster wheel, will observe your $10 machine and laugh. They will boast about their 3% annual raise. Allow them to laugh. They do not comprehend the physics of what you have just accomplished. They are engaged in a linear game constrained by the limits of their physical exhaustion. You have stepped into the realm of the exponential. Your $10 machine does not sleep. It does not take vacations. It does not fall ill. And it never requests a promotion. And because you are fiercely protecting your cognitive bandwidth, you possess the clarity to reinvest that $10. Then it becomes $100, then $1,000, then $10,000. Eventually, the output of your silent compounding machine will surpass the cost of your basic survival. That is the exact beautiful millisecond you achieve escape velocity. Gravity relinquishes its hold. The invisible chains of the wage matrix snap. You can walk into your corporate office, surrender your security badge, and confidently exit the door forever. You will never have to surrender another hour of your finite, irreplaceable life to an employer ever again. The philosophy I have shared with you today is not about lounging on a couch and being lazy. It is about the profound, unshakable realization that your mind constitutes the ultimate compounding asset. The global corporate machine, the financial news networks, and the algorithms on your phone are perfectly, flawlessly designed to grind your brain into dust. They aim to extract your energy, harvest your attention, and eventually leave you with a cheap gold watch and a fragile, underfunded pension. You can accept that script. You can awaken tomorrow morning, check your phone, flood your brain with panic, sit in traffic, and continue spinning the wheel until your heart finally ceases beating. Or you can confront the cold, brutal mathematics of your existence today. You can step off the wheel. You can ruthlessly reclaim your cognitive bandwidth. You can sit in a quiet room, endure the silence, and commence building the machine. The system desires you exhausted. True wealth demands that you be rested. The choice is entirely yours. Compound your capital and protect your mind, or permit the system to compound you. That's all. Thanks for watching.